Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Scale to Exit with Alejandra Santos. I'm very excited to have you here. If you are new in the podcast, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming by. We love to have you here. I'm always very excited to bring you these weekly episodes because they are packed with great conversations with experts and founders that have exited their business, that have successfully exited their business. And they're coming here to share their insights, their expertise, their stories, their strategies, their tools, you name it. Because we're all here for the same purpose of helping you, business owner, founder, no matter if you have been in business for 10, 30 years or just starting out, we're here to help you build a business that is scalable for a high valuable exit. So this is what we're here for. And I'm very excited to bring you today's guest. So today's guest we have is Josh Dorfman. And Josh Dorfman is a climate entrepreneur, author, and media personality. He is the CEO and host of Super Cool, which is a media company covering real-world climate solutions that cut carbon, increase profits, and enhance modern life. He was previously the co-founder and CEO of Plant, a carbon-negative building materials manufacturer, which was named to Fast Company's list of the world's most innovative companies in 2024. He has founded two modern design sustainable furniture companies, directed Vine.com, an Amazon e-commerce business specializing in natural and organic products, and served as the CEO of the Collider, the nation's first innovation center for climate resilience and adaptation solutions. He was also known as a lazy environmentalist. He was also known as the Lazy Environmentalist, a media brand he developed into an award-winning television series on Sundance Channel, a daily radio show on Sirius XM, and two popular books. Wow, he is in our podcast. Everybody listening out there, how cool is this? He's coming to Scale to Exit, and he's going to share with everybody what drives his passion. He's going to share with us what are some fundraising mistakes that people do. He's going to share his experience in the supply chain. What strategies can every business implement to mitigate some of the economic and market risks? He's going to discuss some scaling strategies for growing, which he did put in place, growing a company from a 2 million seed round to a 15 million Series A. He will also discuss what it takes to build a vertically integrated startup. He's going to discuss the intersection of sustainability and exit strategy and how does an exit looks different for a climate startup than any other kinds of business. And he's here to share some personal stories on who he would like to have dinner with and what he would ask them. So stay tuned till the end because it's a great conversation. If you are tuning in from Spotify or Apple or iHeart, go ahead and listen when you're, on the drive to your work or wherever you're going. But please remember, no matter where you're tuning in from, I would really appreciate it if you really like, share, and subscribe, because all of these episodes come in, they're created with so much love for all of you guys, business owners of all ages, of all business stages, because we're here, like I said, to really have a discussion around how to scale a business with a high business valuation that you can exit. Because the one thing I do not want to see more of is people leaving money on that table at the moment of a transaction. I do not want to see that anymore. So I hope that you guys like this episode. If you want me to interview someone of your choice, please write me a comment. I'm always open, available. You can find me on LinkedIn. I put it in the show notes. And let's get to it. I will see you on the other side. All right. Thank you for coming to Scale to Exit, Josh. I'm so excited to have you here. I was looking forward to the conversation because you are such a powerful influence in the entrepreneur and the business ownership and the media and the everywhere. You're in every space. So what drives your passion to become such an influence? You being an angel investor, you have your own media company, you've been on TV shows, you have, you do public speaking, you help entrepreneurs build their companies. So what drives you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, Alejandra. I'm really very excited to talk to you. The What drives me is, I would say there are two forces that drive me. One is I love to create. I think of myself more as a creator than, say, an entrepreneur. It's not necessarily about starting businesses, though I have started several businesses. But it's that thing inside, right? That I want to bring something new into the world. I think something's missing, coupled with, for me, the urgency that I feel around the climate challenge specifically, and feeling like we are in this moment of unprecedented climate innovation, and yet we are also on the clock to speed that up as fast as possible to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And those two combined are massive motivators for me.
When did you start getting so passionate about the climate in your journey?
I was in my 20s. I had moved to China. I was living in Nanjing. I moved there in 1995, about a year after college. I was thinking about a career in diplomacy, State Department, maybe CIA, but that seemed like a little bit of a stretch. But I just figured if I can get to China, like, cool things are going to happen. Like, it will be, if I could just figure out a way to get over there, I think something cool will happen. And through my studies, it started to become clear to me that in the 21st century, where we are now, that this relationship between the US and China would be incredibly important for kind of the state of the world. So
Mm-hmm.
I had that insight, and I got a job teaching English on a university in Nanjing. So that was wonderful. And then I got this part-time job, just looking for some extra cash and to understand the country better. I got a part-time job working in a factory that made bicycle locks. And at the time, there were 1 billion bicycles in China, right? This before all the development, everybody had a bicycle. And I went to work for this American company called Kryptonite that had a lock that's like stronger than Superman, made of kryptonite. And so I go to work for them. I ended up going to work for Kryptonite full time. We opened more factories. It was an amazing experience to be in these, Chinese owned factories where we were manufacturing together. We opened our third factory in southern China in 1997. And by then my Chinese was pretty good. So I was helping kind of facilitate this deal. And I'm traveling with the Chinese owner to this restaurant where we're going to celebrate and like consummate the deal. And in a very Chinese way, it's like what they call baijiu, like they're like basically like grain alcohol and snake blood. And you do this like toast. And then you're like, like, I don't know, Bread Brothers for life or whatever. Before we go into the restaurant, we're in this parking lot and I pull in with this Chinese guy. We're in his Mercedes. And again, it's like 1997 communist China, but we're in his Mercedes. And he says, Josh, look, my Mercedes is the biggest Mercedes of all the Mercedes here in this parking lot. And in that moment, after 2 years being there, I thought two things like, oh my God, you are just like us in many ways. Like, you want more, bigger, biggest car, biggest house, biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
And now you're developing so fast. And nobody wants a bicycle. And there's all these highways being built. There's going to be 1 billion cars here. I don't know anything about global warming. I've never like thought about it, but like, how is this going? There's like, this is so much bigger than the United States. Like how is this even going to be possible? And so that was the moment for me. Kind of the ultimate takeaway from that moment, and kind of the arc of my career, has been, how do we enable Americans, Chinese, Indians, Eastern Europeans, the world to develop and pursue the highest quality of life possible while bringing those lifestyles into balance with nature's capabilities to sustain it? Like, that's my definition of sustainability. It's not like about sacrifice. It's like, can we thread that needle? Can we find the way so that solving climate actually makes life better, not worse? And I think that's possible. And so, yeah, that was my moment in that
I love
parking lot.
that story. I love that story in the parking lot of China, long time ago. But do you think we're doing a good job now? fast forward all these years?
A few years ago, I interviewed a reporter from Bloomberg who covers sustainability and green business.
Yeah.
This guy Eric Roston, and I was interviewing him for something, and I asked him this question, and what he said to me just struck because I think there was so much truth in it. He said, "The call it what you want, the clean energy transition, the drive to a zero carbon future, whatever you want to call it." He's like, in isolation is the wrong word, but if you just look at it at the pace of the innovation, like solar has become the cheapest form of like commercialized energy faster than anything else in the history of the world. If you look at just all this innovation, this is the greatest story of innovation ever told in the history of the world. The only question is it going to all take effect fast enough to avert the worst impacts, right? So that's the moment we find ourselves like, what's happening is so exciting. It's just like, that's the tension, right? So I do think it's incredible the way entrepreneurs and innovators have stepped up to build some really wonderful tech, some really interesting business models, do things differently, and then get big customers to buy in. So I'm an optimist, but that is always the question that we have to ask.
Are we moving fast enough to get to that place where we can either negate what has been done or neutralize, right? To a
That's right.
point that we don't have that much damage anymore. Yeah, but I do agree with you. There's amazing, innovative companies, startups out there that are taking some really good initiatives like yourself. And we're going to talk about some of those initiatives that you're doing. But as an early stage investor, you are an angel investor that invests in early stage startups, and you have been a founder yourself and have built companies alongside of other founders. When is a good time for an early stage startup to start investing in media and branding when it comes to creating these initiatives for the green environment?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at that. And I think the first one is probably what 95% of people should do. And the other one is like what 5% can get away with. And so maybe we'll just start with what the 5% can get away with. If you're building certain kinds of climate, so let's stay on climate technology for a second. Maybe it applies to other technologies. If you're building something that is, you're going to have to wrap a lot of patents around it. For whatever reasons you need some secrecy, right? You're going to like stay in stealth mode. Then the moment for you, obviously, to start building your media strategy is going to be substantially at a later stage. You're going to have to find other ways to connect to investors, and it's not going to be because you've utilized media or social media to build a hype train, a sense of inevitability, and attract like. But that's again, maybe 1% are in that bucket. I think for almost everybody else, the time to start thinking about media is the time that you've actually incorporated your company almost from like day one. And the way to think about that, in my view, is first, you want to be building credibility as a founder in yourself, as not necessarily even being the authority yet in your industry. Maybe it's also like, I have some authority, right? I am someone, there's something about me that makes, I believe I'm going to succeed. And so I think some of the most interesting founder brands when they're starting companies is like, I'm going on this journey, right? I'm doing this thing, and I'm going to do it in such a way where I'm bringing my followers and people who might be interested in seeing this succeed along with me. And anyone can do that, right? Anyone can build that kind of brand early on. And then you get stakeholders, you get fans who feel like, I'm kind of peeking behind the curtain. I'm seeing something like that's, as this is taking form. And I think you can build an incredibly passionate fan base doing that.
So it's very simple, basically. You don't really have to spend lots of money in, going to a media channel or throwing money on advertisement. You can do it in your platform as a founder, create that journey and share it with others for you to start creating the credibility and that leadership. Like you said, I am not the only leader, but like I have authority in my space on my platform. It's very, very simple.
I think the best way probably to illustrate that is to talk about the company that I co-founded in 2021, Planted.
Mm-hmm.
So Planted, we and two co-founders had an idea to create what we call carbon negative building materials. And so
Mm-hmm.
what we were really trying to do is figure out, is there a way to pull carbon, right? Remove carbon from the atmosphere as part of this solving climate change faster than trees do it. Trees, as they grow, right, they capture carbon, right? It's part of their growth cycle. Could we come up with something that grows faster? Like bamboo grows a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
Could we grow something that pulls down carbon from the atmosphere faster? And could we turn that into a useful material, perhaps replacing lumber, so trees actually don't have to get cut down? And maybe we can come up with some way to pull this carbon down, make it turn it into something useful, sell it, build a business. Well, we actually didn't know anything about that. But we had a hunch, well, maybe the material we might grow or the biomass we might grow, maybe it's hemp, right? Maybe there's a lot of hype about hemp. Maybe that's the plan. And so we would go find professors or people who had like experimental crops, and we'd go in these fields and you just take the picture like, whoa, look how pointing up, like look how tall that thing is, right? Like maybe we're gonna, and you just build this like excitement because we're excited, right? And
Yeah.
you're sharing. So we're not the expert there, we don't know about the hemp, like, but we get to interview that guy, we take a picture with him, here's Professor so and so, and now we attach our startup that has no credibility except for whatever credibility maybe the founders have.
Mm-hmm.
But now we attach it to that professor from NC State University and to this field in Salisbury, North Carolina that we've gone and visited, right? And now you're with us on the journey as we're learning. And people like, it was really effective. Stuff like that's really effective.
So it really created an awareness as well, because that is not a topic that a lot of people are familiarized with. So you were also educating, creating awareness of different items and products that you can build for the climate that are basically in front of us on all day as well, like in everyday use. And you did it very simply with your social media platform, and that's something that everybody can do. I love that. How about Super Cool? Because we haven't talked about Super Cool. What did you do there?
Okay, Super Cool is, for me, came out of Planted in that, so I was the founding CEO of Planted. I was there for the first 3 years. I raised our initial rounds of capital, helped establish our commercial relationships. And then when I left, I started Super Cool, which is a media company that essentially covers stories or companies like Planted, like the company I had started. A little bit further along than Planted, Super Cool is this idea of, we're going to build a media company going to tell stories about innovative climate solutions that are already existing in the real world. These are here, these are proven, they're de-risked. If you take this solution to your boss or your CEO, you're not going to get fired, right? Because someone else is already using it at scale, it works. And what I was feeling was that if you look back over the last decade, and we don't do just technology, but if you just look at technology as an example, there are, well, as of last year, when we put our pitch deck together, 1,750 companies that have raised Series B capital or beyond that are climate tech over let's say, the last decade. That is a huge number. Now, not all those companies are probably, so I'm sure some of them failed even still, but if you can get to a Series B financing round, you're pretty solid, right? You are in market, you have customers. And so I started to look at that, all of the money flowing into these industries, thousands upon thousands, literally 13,000 cities around the world that are united in an alliance where they're creating climate action plans for their cities and turning their cities into living laboratories for experimentation and climate action. And I felt there is so much progress underway that's underreported. Let's go build a media brand, Super Cool, that tells the stories of what works. I mean, that's essentially what it is. And to do that, we are in the exercise of storytelling, right? So we have to be really good storytellers. And so, that takes, as you know, that takes a lot of time, but that's what this is really about, is finding the hooks that's going to get someone to care about what I want to put into the world. And my guiding light, I would say. My North Star is when we want to cover something either on our podcast or our newsletter or YouTube or whatever, is would someone care about what I'm about to tell them, this solution I'm about to talk to them about, even if they don't care about saving the planet? Does this meet something for them? Right? Maybe it's a fashion thing, or maybe it's I'm going to save money thing, or maybe it's right, makes my life easier thing. So right, like that's the bar. Because if I can hook you with something that actually solves your pain, that's not climate, but then also there is this climate benefit too. Usually there's a story there that's going to entice people or capture their attention, and we're in the business of capturing attention.
Oh, wow. I love that. So, storytelling is huge, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs and founders really don't utilize it as much as they should, I would say. And you're really big on that space because you have Super Cool, which is a media brand, and that's a lot of storytelling for other amazing brands out there. What would be some strategies that you would share with entrepreneurs and business owners that for them to do efficient storytelling?
Mm-hmm. I think it's so if you think about, certainly I think early stage tech entrepreneurs, but most entrepreneurs, I think one of the pitfalls that entrepreneurs need to watch out for is falling in love too much with their solution, falling in love too much with their technology or my store or whatever it might be. Because what you need to fall in love with is the benefits and the outcomes that your technology or your store or whatever are going to give to your customer, right? Because and so let me kind of paint a picture of what I mean. We just did a fascinating show with this entrepreneur. His name is Oded Omer. He's from Israel. And he created a technology that didn't exist before, like just straight up didn't exist, to try to solve food waste, right? Food waste is the scale of food waste as a problem on so many levels is just, it defies the imagination. If food waste were a country, it would have the third most carbon emissions, only behind China and the United States. Like that's how much, billions and billions and billions of pounds of food are wasted every year. It's sad. It's terrible. And so what Oda did was he went to grocery stores and he said, look, I have a solution that, what do you do grocery store? You've got these fruits, you got these vegetables, you got all these things with expirations on it, right? Expiration dates. And you're in this race grocery store to try to sell that before the expiration date hits. Because if you don't, it's going to the landfill or it's right. You have to, you're throwing it away. And he's like, and that's profit. You're just throwing away. And that's food that someone's not eating. And that's huge carbon emissions that are like, this is, and he's like, I have this AI solution that is very simple. It sounds simple, but what we're going to do is we're going to learn over time, like take like the yogurt. We're not going to wait till the last day and then slash the price by 40% and pray that we move all the yogurt. We're going to find the sweet spot, say over the last like week and a half. Maybe we'll drop the price 2%, see what happens. Drop the price 1.9%. We'll learn. Did someone buy it? Is that a good way to do it? And we'll get really smart. So we'll do dynamic discounting. We'll save your profit. We'll sell the food, right? And we're going to do all this good for the planet. Now, if Oded had gone to a company and said, hey, I have an AI solution for your store. Well, there's no store manager that wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I really need in my store today? I could really use some more AI, right? Like that's not how anyone thinks. But so many entrepreneurs are like, let me tell you about my AI. Right? And it's like, stop, because no one's buying your AI. They're going to buy how you help solve their pain. And that's where you need to focus your story.
Oh, I love that. That is such a great advice for everybody that's listening. And I am guilty of that. And a lot of people are guilty of that. It's like, don't fall in love with the product or the service, fall in love with the solution and then explain it, relay the message to the consumer in terms of solution, not the actual product. Because you're right. Nobody cares. I have an AI tool, but they do care about how you're going to make my life easier.
Totally. And so in my industry, in climate, you have two problems, because you have that penchant that every entrepreneur wants to talk about their solution, right? And then everybody wants to talk about how that solution is also solving climate. And even people who like want to solve climate can't buy something just because it solves climate if they're working in a business. It has to help solve a business problem, right? And so there's these two things that in my industry entrepreneurs get caught up in that are not effective for getting a customer and getting to that sale. They're great. Everybody wants to talk to them, wants to talk about once the sale's done.
And you actually touched on a really good topic right now, because yeah, you're right. People don't really care too much about the climate solution as long as it pitches profitability or it does something as well for their business or impacts them in some kind of way that is tangible to them. But we know climate and sustainability are huge. And how does that affect the exit? What would you say is the intersection of sustainability and exit strategy when it comes to valuation, impact, and long-term market relevance?
Yeah. So now I'm going to say something that's going to sound maybe slightly contradictory to what I just explained. But bear with me because I think it does make sense. When you're starting to think about positioning for an exit and you have a company that is whatever it might be. Maybe it's a cleaning product, right? And that cleaning product, maybe it's a natural cleaning product, so it has less toxic stuff. It's better for the environment, better for people in their home. At exit, I do think both of those things matter. I think, of course, what are the financials? What's the EBITDA? What's the multiple? What's all that stuff, right? And you're never going to get away from that. But at that point, also, what's the mission? What's the traction? What are the results of this sustainability company? What can we point to say, hey, we eliminated, X hundred or thousand or million tons of carbon dioxide or some other metric, right? Or we saved water. Both of those things I think matter a great deal at exit. And honestly, both of those things do matter a great deal while raising capital, because I do think, depending on who you're selling to, buyers want to feel really good about the business, and then they want that extra special thing that makes them feel like, and I'm doing something really good from a mission standpoint as well. I think it's in that moment, that's your opportunity to shine and tell both of those stories. And I think if you have that sustainability component, it's actually an edge when you're going to exit versus companies that are less mission driven.
Yes, no, I love that you said that. And you also said something about fundraising. Sustainability is also very important for fundraising. What is your experience as an angel investor, early stage startup? What is your experience between a startup that it doesn't include sustainability strategies in their business model versus one that does?
So for early stage companies, really what you're selling is vision. Right? You're selling a future state of your company that doesn't exist, because you have a financial model with a lot of assumptions in it, and experienced investors are going to know, like, you really have no idea. And that's okay, because an experienced investor is going to say, I'm less concerned about your financial model as me understanding what assumptions you're making about your model, so I can understand your thinking, because everything's going to change. It's not going to work out the way you want. But in that early stage, you're selling yourself. Investors are buying you, and they're buying your vision. And so if that vision is tied to, of course, we're going to make a ton of money, great. But I do think it's that other aspect too. And we're going to do a lot of good along the way. Those, I look at that as, that's a hook. There's emotional resonance there where you can kind of latch into that investor and pull them towards you. Because my experience is that early stage investors are often looking for a way to lean out, to not get hooked, usually investors are looking, it's been my experience, more for a no than a yes. And so you really want to use, if I can use sustainability, not, that's a hook, right? If I can use design, that's a hook. But I do think, like, having that bigger mission where an investor can tell their friends, it's like, hey, here's this really cool thing I invested in. It's going to make a ton of money, right? Okay, well, that's cool. And it does XYZ for the planet. Well, now, now you're a hero, right? And you want to make your investors heroes.
Yes, I love that you said, and make your investors heroes. So there is a weight when it comes to having a mission-driven brand coming when it is fundraising and obviously going for an acquisition or an exit because and the consumer because people feel more connected and people feel more emotional attracted to you and basically you can influence on customer behavior and apparently we can also influence on investors at an early stage if we're mission driven. So that's really good to know. When it comes to Planted, I would like to know what was the go-to-market strategy, if you can share a little bit. And I know you were vertically owned in the supply chain, right? So maybe we can talk about some of the challenges that come and benefits that come with being vertically owned.
Yes. So Planted, as I described, is we're creating building materials from a new biomass that's never been done before. We ended up finding we didn't use hemp, we didn't use bamboo. We ended up identifying a grass that we consider proprietary, but we found a grass similar to bamboo that works for what we're trying to accomplish, meaning it grows extremely fast, probably 8 to 9 to 10 times faster than trees. We're harvesting it every single year. A tree, you have to wait 15, 20, 40 years to cut it down. It has a structure to the biomass it's very strong. And so we can actually use it as a replacement for trees in building materials. So that's awesome. That's also a little bit crazy. So nobody wanted to work with us, right? There was no one, right? So no one's like, and like there was no one to call to order the grass, right? There's no like, hey, can you deliver, 5,000 tons of this? Like, no, because there's no supply chain, right? Because it's a crazy idea. And so vertical integration was initially, we had no choice, right? It's like, okay, if we're going to do this, let's go figure out the tissue culture lab. Let's go figure out the greenhouses. Let's go figure out who's going to grow for us. Let's build partnerships, relationships with farmers. Once you do that, now that actually is a very strong competitive advantage, right? Because now you control something and you know how it works and nobody else does if you succeed. And we're on that path. And so, and then we said, because I started this with two guys who were formerly at SpaceX, building incredible technology to keep astronauts alive in space. One led the life support systems team on the Dragon spacecraft. I mean, ridiculously smart guys. We said, okay, what's the most common material used in building a home made from wood? And it turns out it used to be plywood, right? It used to be because you nail the plywood to all the 2x4s and you start to get, but there's a material called oriented strand board, which I'd never heard of, but oriented strand board replaced plywood basically because it's usually cheaper. And it's just like chipped pieces of wood, you glue them together, essentially, and you get oriented strand board. And we said we're going to replace that because it's the most ubiquitous. And then we said to builders, because as we're learning, we're like, well, what's wrong with it? Like, is there a problem to solve? And they said, well, if it gets wet, that's not good because it will lose its structural, integrity. Brilliant. Now we got a problem to solve. Let's go. And so to make all that happen, there was no machine to buy. We had to build all the machines. Right. So with the SpaceX team, you can actually build all the machines. And so we built a brand new, never built before production line. And different from the rest of our industry, there's no smokestack on top of our building. It's electric. And so, because that's our mission. And so we felt we're going to grow this grass, we're going to pull down carbon really fast. We're going to bring that grass into our factory. We'll slice it, we'll put it into this machine. We'll get something that replaces oriented strand board. It will stand up better to moisture. And then we're going to go give it to builders. And we're going to really try and hit that same price or be very close. And it's going to work just the same. And it's going to go into that home. And no builder is even going to know it's there. No one has to put an extra nail in it or do anything different. This is what we need to do to succeed. And we need to own this whole thing because this is a crazy idea and no one's going to do it with us no matter what. So let's go figure it out. And by figuring it out, like I said, then you kind of have a moat. Then you have something that's hard for others to, if you're right, it's hard for others to copy.
Oh my God, that's an inspiring story because it just shows how resilient you all were. Like, I mean, you could have just said, okay, this we don't have the material. What are we gonna do? We're just gonna go with something that we know. But instead, you decide, okay, we need to create the material because there's no suppliers. We're gonna own the whole thing. We're gonna create the machines, and then we're gonna make a builder buy our product because it's way better than what they're using, and that's what we're gonna do. I just love it. Just shows how much resilience an entrepreneur needs to have, especially when the product is not even out there. You guys created a market for something that didn't exist. That's basically what you guys did. Now, did you guys get any push from builders at the beginning to make sales?
When we started, when we felt like we had a good idea, and there, I thought there were going to be two paths to market. Actually, in fairness, I actually thought there was going to be one path to market, and I thought it was going to be really challenging. I knew that green builders, builders that build environmentally friendly homes, for the most part, would be very interested in what we were doing. And especially early on when we were talking about hemp, people kind of know something about hemp. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, hemp, that sounds cool. Like, I'm interested. The challenge that I was concerned about the whole time was to try to sell to lots and lots of little builders in smaller volumes, ones and twos, or 50 boards here, 80 boards there, is it's like death by a thousand cuts, right? It's so hard to build that distribution. It's just I was really concerned about it. When we went through our first funding round, we raised $2 million in 2021, our seed round. The most important thing, probably other than getting the money, was the network we built while raising that cash. And one of the investors we talked to introduced us to the largest home builder in America, a company called D.R. Horton. D.R. Horton builds about 1 out of every 7 new homes in the country. It is just massive, massive company. And thankfully, they were interested in what we were doing for several different reasons. But when you build as much as D.R. Horton builds, you think about your access to supply of material much differently than almost everybody else, except maybe their peers, the giant companies at the top. And sustainability was something that was important to them. But what they were hearing about, kind of the innovation, what we were doing, how we were thinking about setting this up, they came to visit. And that was massive because I instantly felt like, wow, if we can build a relationship with this company, we can get to so much higher volume without having to do all that hand-to-hand combat out of all those smaller relationships. So, and that relationship has worked out. I mean, a lot of the job was to, and continues to be, cultivating that relationship, making sure that everyone feels good about it, cultivating relationships with other large builders as well. But D.R. Horton, in 2024, things had progressed to a point where we received an order for them for 10 million panels. Mm-hmm. So not 50 here, 60 here, 80 there. Mm-hmm. 10 million panels is about 90,000 new single-family homes. That's roughly 10 to 15% of what gets built in any given year in all of America. Mm-hmm. And we got there in 3.5 years. And that really, so our go-to-market really became about getting the largest home builder on the planet to have a lot of trust in our capabilities to deliver and to be a really strong, supplier and partner to them.
So basically, if you guys became such a strong, you guys had that a really strong connection because of your investor that was in your cap table, was in the fundraising round that you guys did. He really supported you guys move forward with the vision of the company by giving you his relationships. And that's like what comes to say when you're fundraising, like make sure that you are picking who is going to be in your business, because that's what investors do, open up doors, right, for your business. And that just left to say that this is something that entrepreneurs should always have in mind. And because of your experience with supply chain, what tariffs was not a thing back in the day. Now it's a thing. The huge volatility in the tariffs and what's happening in the market and the economic uncertainty. What would have been some strategies that you would have implemented back then if the tariffs were going on that you advise business owners out there to implement right now?
So one thought before I answer that, just because of what you were saying, Alejandra.
Yes.
The thing about raising capital that's so important is it's not even just the investors who are on your cap table. Investors, like their currency with other investors in their network is, even if they're not going to invest, if they think what you're doing is great, maybe it's just not a fit for their funds. Maybe it just doesn't fit their thesis or what their limited
Yeah.
partners are general, right? Like they still want to, they want to help open doors for you, because if it's a good introduction for them, that elevates them in the eyes of other peers. And so they're trading, right? So building those relationships with investors, regardless of if they're coming in, and making sure those relationships are super tight and you are always like responsive and thankful, and all of that is so important for founders to do, to keep building that network, because you never know who's going to open that door for you. At the time, the investor who connected us to D.R. Horton, he actually hadn't invested yet.
Okay.
So it's just so important. Now, to your second question about tariffs, one of the things that for Planted early on was that we felt was, we weren't, of course, thinking about tariffs, but we were thinking about resilience of us. How could we build a resilient supply chain? And so for us, that meant, could we really localize what we do with flexibility? Could we be flexible where we grow? Could we be flexible where we put our factory? Could we potentially put our factory closer to where a home builder is building and do something that the industry can't, because it can't move the trees? And so that's the way we developed our technology, our this production technology, this production line I mentioned. It's actually like, I don't know, it's like, it's a miniature version of a modern mill. Like a modern mill, if you go look where they make this material-oriented strand board or plywood, it's like a town. It's like a massive thing, giant smokestacks. Our production line can fit in almost any warehouse in America, and like we can move it around if someone wanted us to. And so that flexibility, that thinking about supply chain innovation, meant that we knew if there were Canadian wildfires that was going to raise the price of wood or create risk of imports, we don't have that risk, because we're growing and manufacturing locally. If there's a war in Russia and Ukraine, and that's going to interrupt the import of Baltic birch and other wood into America, we don't carry that risk, and our customers don't have to carry that risk. Same with tariffs. And so localization. But the reason why we thought about localization also is because we're trying to minimize carbon emissions. We don't want to ship things long distances, right? And so all of those things play in. I think for how I would advise someone else, the only thing I could say to a founder, it's really tricky for founders, because you just don't have that many options. You don't have that much, you don't have time and you don't have capital. And usually if you find a path for the thing you're trying to do, let's say that thing's coming from China, you probably are going all in. Like that probably is like the risk you're going to have to take. I think in hindsight, maybe there is some question now of like, okay, in the world we live in today, do I need to have an alternative path? Do I need to have a plan B that I could turn on if something goes right, because of all the geopolitical risk in the world today, right? Where fair trade is, free trade, I should say, is being called into question. It's a very good question. I don't, unfortunately, have a very strong answer for it.
No, but I love that. I love the fact that you say localization could be an option for a lot of businesses out there. And I feel like a lot of businesses that are already established are looking into bringing their manufacturing to the US because of that reason. So when you are starting a business and you're building one, start thinking about what could happen in the future. I feel like 2025 is a very good example of what could happen in the future. Repeat the story again, and that could be localization. So I feel like you are into really something very important that not only founders, but also business owners that have established businesses should look into when it comes to manufacturing their own product. So you take me from 2 million seed round. What was the Series A that you guys did?
So the Series A was all in through the partners that came in. It was roughly around $15 million.
How do you get from 2 to 15?
For us, so again, it comes back to what are you doing at the $2 million round? You're selling vision, right? You're selling something that we're selling a future of the world where you can build more, because the more you build with planted materials, the more you are sequestering carbon from the atmosphere and actually solving climate change, right? We have this frame that we're trying to put into investors' minds that says everything you've been told about climate change, like we need to pull back, we need to suffer, we need to sacrifice, we need to do less, we need to constrain our lifestyles. We are the antidote, right? With planted, you do more, because the more you use our product, the more you're actually solving climate. That's a great place for like sustainability brands to be. And so we were executing, I would say, on several fronts. But what we had to do from seed to Series A was we had to hit some proof points in the agriculture supply chain. We had to show that, okay, yes, we have, here is this grass, it grows, we know how to do that, we know how to we know the whole thing. We know how to take it from tissue culture to greenhouses to hardy plants that can go in the ground, are actually going to grow, and we can harvest them. Now it's still Series A, it's not Series B, it's not later. So we had to show that path is clear. We had to prove out a lot around the technology, right? Like we've built these machines, right? We can create, and for us, a really big proof point was getting to a full size 4-foot by 8-foot sheet that the industry uses, right? That's what they nail or screw to the 2x4 in a house. And we had to get that certified. And so we had to have it be at commercial ready scale. I think we'd already put some on a house at that point. So we really had to show that we had the supply chain ready to go. The material is built. We can scale that up, and we have the commercial relationships. And then on top of that, and we had that story, and we were pushing very hard to get a lot of media coverage around the Series A, prior to the Series A.
Yeah.
Right? It's still like building the hype machine, it's important. I think it's an asset if you can create that sense of inevitability of like, oh, I keep hearing about super cool. I keep hearing about super cool before you get on the phone with the investor. And then they're like, oh, I keep hearing about you guys. That's where you want the conversation to be. That guarantees nothing, right? But it does shift the odds a little bit more in your favor.
And it definitely makes your brand more aware, for other people, become brand awareness about you, what you're doing. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get the money or whatever, but it does help in some way, shape, and form, right? Let's talk about Super Cool, because Super Cool is such an important company. I mean, it helps climate tech and all other kinds of startups get in the eye of the beholder, I would say. How do you pick your brands that are coming into Super Cool? Is there like a specific requirement, or what is it?
Twofold. So I want to know, when we're going to look at a company, I want to be able to understand quantifiably, how does this climate, let's say climate tech companies, but I'll give you a different example as well. How is this actually reducing carbon by existing, being a solution for other governments or other companies or whoever is using their service or solution? And how many customers do they have? Like, does it exist in the world? If I wanted to pick up the phone and buy it, could I do that? Right? What's the scale? And those are really the two biggest pieces for me, right? That's what I like. That's the baseline. That's what I need to know. Does it exist? Is it real world? Is it scaling up market? Is it beyond pilots? And does it cut carbon? And then we have other filters that are a little more subjective for us. Does this actually improve quality of life in some ways and make life better? But it's not all tech. Like, we did have this guy on the show, Kyle Wagenschutz. His organization is called City Threat. And I found him because he did something that no one else had ever figured out how to do. And that was, in the United States, get cities to build safe, protected bike lanes in months instead of decades. And when I heard about that, I was like, I need to talk to this guy, because everybody, 90% of the people want bike lanes, but like, they're not being built fast enough. Why not? This guy has the answer. And so, sometimes we're just very interested in like what this guy has to say. And quickly, what Kyle had to say, he had a lot of things to say, because they did this in New Orleans and Pittsburgh and Province, Rhode Island and Denver and Austin, Texas, all over the country. so, and then one of the things comes back to storytelling and actually communication. And he's like, look, like if you're going to go try and get bike lanes, and I think there's like parallels to this for businesses as well. He's like, you don't need to go convince people who ride bikes. Don't talk to them. Like you don't like who needs to like be on board for you to like to get bike lanes? Car drivers. I'm like, okay, well, how do you get car drivers on board with bike lanes? He's like, you spend a lot of time figuring out how to communicate and tell a story that's actually going to get them excited. I'm like, okay, what's the story? He's like, well, we tried a million things, but two things work. Wouldn't you like to have a safer, faster commute because people on bikes would be in their own lane and wouldn't be in your way? Wouldn't that be less stressful? Yes. Okay, check. Wouldn't you like to be able to live in a neighborhood or in a community that reminds you a little bit of how you grew up, where everything was a little bit slower, kids could be safe, outside, maybe they can walk to school, and kind of play to this nostalgia. And he's like, that was incredibly valuable. We expanded the tent, we got rid of the naysayers, and we built the bike lanes. Other things too. But I was like, man, it's just so interesting. It's like you want to build all this infrastructure, right? You want to build the stuff. And what does it come back to at the end of the day? It's about communication and finding people and talking about the benefits and the outcomes, right? Not the bike lane. They actually don't care about the bike lane, but they want a less stressful commute and they want their kids to be able to walk to school and be safe, right? So let's talk about how we deliver that. I just think it's universal, getting that, that conversation right and that branding communication right for every organization.
Josh, but what happens if somebody doesn't know how to ride a bike?
Oh my gosh. Rarely am I stumped. Rarely do I not have an if, but geez, I did not see that curveball coming. Let's see what happens. My gosh, tricycle.
How do you sell a product to someone? I'm just saying, maybe it should come with an education, I don't know.
Yeah. Come on down to the clinic. If you don't know how to ride a bike, we're teaching biking on Saturday afternoon. And, come be part of this like joyous, wonderful community. Yeah.
And it could be part of the community, correct? That could be like a community marketing approach. I think that's really cool. What Super Cool is doing. Do you guys, obviously you said it has to be traction and revenue. So you're not looking for like super early stage startups who just have a vision. It has to be some kind of proof of concept.
We're not, because that's our brand positioning in the market. My view is there are other really strong outlets, media outlets that do cover the early stage, that do go tell those stories. What I want Super Cool to be known for is, as climate continues to become more and more important, if somebody says, I've got to figure out climate solutions that work, what's out there, what's actually happening that's real. I want whoever they're talking to be like, oh, you should go check out Super Cool because that's what they talk about. That's the positioning that I want for what we're building.
Yeah. And I love that. I actually love the fact that you are putting so much light to amazing startups and businesses that are doing something for the environment in different ways, right? Do you want to talk about it a little bit, because you have been in the front seat of fundraising, about some of the mistakes that you have seen the founders have done fundraising that maybe you should advise them to not do that anymore?
Yeah. So we've talked about one but I'll repeat it. I think it's really important to remember as a founder to talk about, when you're pitching or communicating your business, you're building a business. Your business is not the product, right? You're not building a product. And a lot of founders want to tell you everything about their product, but an investor wants to know, I'm not investing in your product, I'm investing in your business, right? So you really need to tell me about your business. And that's a mind shift for a lot of entrepreneurs. I think the other piece that's important to get a good handle on is how much really understand how much you're raising and why are you raising the amount you're raising, right? So there's real justification behind it. Know the parameters of what's viable for your industry at your stage, in your geography, if you're in the US or other countries, because if you're in the Southeast, you might not be able to raise as much as you might be able to if you're in San Francisco. And the valuation expectations are probably going to be different. You might get a higher valuation if you're in San Francisco or New York or somewhere where the more established ecosystem, if you're in other parts of the country. You can counteract those things. You can go look for investors in other places, but really go into your funding round kind of knowing as much as you can about the investors you're going to talk to and what their expectations are and what their kind of experiences with companies like yours, because what you want to sound from the beginning is credible. And if somebody says, if you're saying, hey, I'm raising $1 million on a $5 million post-money valuation, I'm giving up 20% of my company, right? Like, you don't want to be saying that to an investor either way, who's like, that's way too high for like companies at your stage in our city never do that, right? You don't want to be in that place. And you also don't want to be too low where someone's like, oh, I would have invested on a $10 million, right? But like, right? That's research. Do your homework so you sound really credible. That's my advice too.
Yeah. And you gave some really, really good advices, like focus on the business, not the product. And that's exactly that overall theme that I see with early stage founders, that they do as they're so passionate about their product. So like, but it looks so pretty and this is but no investor really cares about the packaging and the design. I mean, they want to know, am I going to make my money? How are you making the money? Where is the customer acquisition? And all of those great metrics. And then obviously the second one is the valuation piece, which I keep telling everybody, be real with the valuation. Don't get too high. Don't go too low, but no, especially don't go too high. Because you see valuations going at like 15 million, 10 million for a very early stage with no traction, no revenue. And you know that they're in for a really nice conversation with someone in the future. So
yeah. And then the thing is too, and we've really seen this in the last few years where the market was so frothy 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, where early stage companies could command high valuations, which seems great. But today, the market is much more mixed. It's harder to command that valuation. And if you're going for your next round off a valuation that's already high, that can scare other investors off. It can just make things tricky. And so you really, as an early stage founder, you've got to see and feel and believe that you are in this for the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And you want to plan, in your head, you want to be planning out accordingly. If this goes well, what's my next round going to look like? Am I next? At least have some mental model. Put some effort and energy into thinking about it so that you avoid some of those mistakes that really can come back to bite you if you're not careful.
yes, I mean, I've seen startups that actually have to do a down round because their valuation was too high. And I mean, I'm sure their investors were not happy about that one. So there's a lot of things that you can prevent. You can have a good team besides you. You know, maybe there is a business team, because most of the times a creative person, is creative by nature, and that's okay. But surround yourself with a business team that really know where to head with the startup, right? When it comes to fundraising. Okay, let's do a personal question. Okay, what does self-care mean to you, and how do you incorporate that into your daily routine?
Self-care for me is about being in nature. I mean, not as much as I possibly can be, but making sure that I take time to be in nature. And I've been pretty intentional about it. The last 10 years, I spent a lot of that living in the mountains of Western North Carolina in Asheville, where you're surrounded by beauty. Now I live on the coast in South Carolina, a town called Surfside Beach. Part of the reason why we chose it, or part of the reason why I love it, is because it's a very, it's an accessible town. It's not like an overly expensive town. So it's not gated or anything. The reason why I say it like that is because we're surrounded by trees and we're right at the ocean. And that's kind of a rare combination, I feel like. And that's really important to me. So I can get out. I need to be around trees. And I love being at the ocean. And so I try and integrate that into my daily routine as much as possible, and to exercise and just spend time.
I'm exactly like you. I love nature. That's my self-care. And I intentionally move by a lake right now, and I moved by the ocean not too long ago, and I just love it. I mean, if you have to choose one, would you choose lake, ocean, mountain, desert? What would be your choice?
Gosh, I feel like it's just, the life season that I'm in. Right now I choose ocean. So
Okay.
right now I choose ocean. I have loved them all. and I do love them all. But right now, I'd say beach.
I chose the ocean for many years, and now I'm like having the lake life, and I like the lake life. It's
That's awesome.
actually really fun.
Yeah, that's cool to hear.
Okay, one last one. If you had the opportunity to meet someone and sit next to them at dinner, who would that be, and what would you ask them?
Okay, this is a very I'm glad this question's coming up because I just read this book called Codename Helene, and it's historical fiction based on the life of a woman named Nancy Drake. And Nancy Drake was Australian, and during World War II, she was in France leading the French resistance as kind of as D-Day was approaching, and Europe and the Allies were getting ready to to come onto the continent and try and put an end to the war. She had already been there as a leader of like thousands and thousands of Frenchmen, and to go back to World War II and try to imagine a woman who could command the respect of all things Frenchmen, like that's like a very challenging cult, right? And she did, and they showed her unbelievable deference, and she was really integral to the Allies winning that war. Most people had never heard her story, but what I loved about learning about her through this book was her leadership. And so I would ask her about leadership, and I would ask her about you know how she is able to just really that. I think I would ask her about decisiveness as a leader, because that's one thing that came through, because the stakes were so high. It was life and death. Um, and I found her decision making capability. And again, it was historical fiction, but there's a lot written about her that I didn't know, that I've gone and looked into. She was just a remarkable leader. So
So,
yeah,
what would you ask her?
I would say, when the stakes are so high, how not yeah, I would probably say, like, what's your decision making? What's your decision making process? Do you lean into your gut? Are you
Mm.
collecting facts?
Mm.
Walk me through how you make such effective decisions.
Oh my God, I really want to read her book. What was the book name again?
Code name Helene. And I literally just read it. I just finished it a few days ago. It was an author I hadn't heard of, so I can't tell you the author's name. But Code name Helene, Helene. So good, so good.
Okay, everybody that's listening, tune in to Codename Helen, because it does sound, I mean, decision making is huge. And that actually affects how you run your business as well. Because if you're not very good at if you are basing your decision making on impulsive reaction, then you're probably not going to have a business for very long, So like if you're basing your decision making on logical reasoning, it's just very different. The impulse reaction, or like you said, is it your gut, or like is huge when it comes to running a business. So it's really good to hear that. Yeah. Okay, Josh. Well, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to talk before we leave?
I am completely talked out in the best way imaginable. This was wonderful. So no, I think we've hit on all the notes I was hoping to be able to touch on.
Yes, and I feel very grateful that you came into the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your insightful knowledge on fundraising, on go to market, on everything that you're doing and building, especially for climate tech and environmental friendly tech startups out there. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
The best place to find us is at the super cool website, which is getsuper.cool. You can find newsletter, podcast. Of course, we're on all social. I'm usually on LinkedIn. So if people want to connect with me directly, that's the best place to find me. And that would be great. Be happy to connect with listeners.
Awesome. Perfect. So I will put it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Josh, for your amazing presence to Scale to Exit. And till next time, adios, muchachos. Bye.